Did you know that Apple Podcasts has a very different front page for whichever territory you happen to be in? They do, and you can't access it unless you use the tool that I'm about to tell you about. So Apple Podcasts has a different version of the app on your phone, depending on what country and region you are in. So for example, people in the UK are looking at a very different Apple Podcasts from those in the US. The trick is knowing how to get access to them because, believe it or not, even if you're using a VPN on your phone or on your desktop browser, you're still not going to be able to bypass that block, that geographical lock. They've been very clever with this. The only way of doing it is to go into your actual settings and change the country you're in the store. But of course, that would be an absolute ball ache every time you wanted to check the different version of Apple Podcasts. This is why this is good news. I'm about to tell you about a really easy workaround that I can offer you. We've cracked the code to this at Podnose Podcasting because we've had to. I had to do some research because when I started picking up clients in different parts of the world, I needed to be able to strategize their podcast within the various different Apple Podcast regions. For example, if I submitted a podcast for New and Noteworthy to be featured by the Apple Podcast team in the US, I wouldn't have a clue whether or not it was accepted because I'm in the UK, so I don't see the same screen that my clients in the US see. Likewise for Australia, for Germany, anywhere. Wherever they're in a different part of the world, I can't see what they see. So as you can imagine, if I didn't know how to do this, my clients might get featured in Apple Podcasts and I wouldn't be able to tell them about it. In fact, this happened quite recently. About a year ago, a podcast I work on got featured in Apple Podcasts in the US. I had no idea. It was only by chance they told me when a friend of theirs told them. I'll give you another real-world example of why this can be useful to change between the different territories within Apple Podcasts. One of the podcasts I work on is called WeenieCast, hosted by Katie McManus.
Squirrel. In this episode, we're going to talk about how you making less money than your clients or peers doesn't make you less deserving of your seat at the table. Squirrel. Hi, I'm Katie McManus, business strategist and money mindset coach, and welcome to the WeenieCast. Squirrel.
It's targeting any entrepreneurs who happen to have ADHD, but it also serves anybody who's an entrepreneur who wants to scale their business to 6 figures or more. In a recent episode, Katie talked about Jen Sincero, the author of the book, You Are a Badass. One of my team actually noticed that the podcast was ranking for the search term Jen Sincero based on that mention, and it stayed there for quite a while. It was ranking in the top 50 for all episodes and shows mentioning Jen Sincero. That's fantastic. I wouldn't have known about it unless my team had access to the tools to check. And the great thing about this, using the tool that I'm about to tell you about allows you to switch between countries as easily as clicking a button. You can change between the US and the UK within less than a minute. Now, I've provided you with a handy drop-down tool that you can use on my website, podmastery.co/Apple Podcasts hack. Use this to keep an eye on your search rankings within different countries, whether or not you've been getting reviews that you're not knowing about because they've been left in a different country, and even whether or not you've been featured in any categories on the homepage. Let me know how you get on with it. Best of luck. Want to ignore the vanity metrics and get real-world results from your podcast? Book yourself one of my popular podcast audits. You can book one now at podmastery.co/audit. That's podmastery.co/audit. Here's a tip for you to encourage engagement in your podcast. You know what it's like for us podcasters? We seem to speak into the void, having no idea whether or not our content is resonating with our listeners. Here's a quick and easy way to try and encourage some feedback and engagement. As much as we might secretly loathe them, they are ahead of the game when it comes to trying to encourage more engagement within podcasting. I'm talking about Spotify. They've now started to release questions and answers and polls on the podcast landing pages. This is a great opportunity for you to take your transcript of your episode and have a look at a piece of content within there. Zero in on it, and maybe use it as a bit of inspiration for you to ask a question of your audience. Say, for example, you've done a podcast about cryptocurrency. Nobody's judging you much. If within that episode you had a conversation with somebody who is an absolute crypto expert, and they talked about something specific within crypto that not many people know about, this is a great opportunity for you to ask a question around that topic to try and encourage some feedback. Maybe your listeners might tell you something like, well, kind of got it, but not really. Can you explain it in more detail? This gives you some great pointers for the kind of content that your listeners are looking for from your show. Should we talk numbers? Should we talk top ranking? Should we talk global top ranking numbers? All right, so we all know about the top 1% podcast claim that a lot of podcasters are putting on their websites that they're taking from listen notes. They're garbage. Ignore those. They do not mean anything, okay? Here are the legitimate numbers which will tell you what your global ranking is in terms of percentage points. Okay, first of all, let me tell you 7.5% of all podcasts are getting more than 5,000 downloads per episode within 30 days. 133 is the average number of downloads across all podcasts within 30 days. Here are those numbers for you to compare your show against. If you're getting more than 133 downloads per episode within the first 30 days, you're beating half of all shows before we even start. If you're getting 500 downloads for your new episode within the first 30 days, this means you're beating 70% of all podcasts, putting you in the global top 30%. 1,200 downloads within 30 days? Fantastic. That means you're in the top 20%. 3,200 downloads within 30 days puts you in the top 10%. 7,400 downloads within 30 days means that you're a top 5% podcaster. 17,000 downloads within 30 days makes you a top 2% podcaster. And if you're lucky enough to have 29,000 downloads for your new episodes within 30 days, that makes you officially a legit top 1% podcaster. Feel free to put that all over your social media, on your website, stick it in your LinkedIn headline, whack it on your Facebook page, because you are officially a top 1% podcaster, not from Listen Notes. And congratulations, you're better than the rest of us. Well, that's it for this latest episode of the Podmaster. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do follow the show if you found it useful and leave us a review in whatever your favorite podcast app of choice is. We love Apple Podcasts. But you know what? Spotify, they're starting to catch up. So by all means, leave us some comments in the new Spotify for Podcasters Q&A section. The Podmaster is a Podnose podcasting production. Find out more about us at podnose.co.uk. That's podknows.co.uk. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Podmaster podcast. The fact that you've listened this far tells me you got something out of the episode. Want to get more free tips and insight on how to improve your podcast? Each email will contain insightful, valuable, actionable tips that you can apply to your podcast today to get closer to Podmastery. Sign up now at podmastery.co. That's podmastery.co.